So, as I'm pretty sure everyone knows by now, I did play Kiwami 3 at some point. I didn't pay for it, and I fucked over Sega in my doing so I'm not a hypocrite. Don't go spreading nonsense about me on Twitter. Even if you do, I won't know about it, so I will not be pissed about it, which I'm pretty sure is the only reason anyone would try to do that in the first place. But yeah, I played Kiwami 3, and there's a lot that would be worth talking about in regards to it. The abysmal story alterations, the disgusting combat that doesn't even work, the side content that may as well not even exist for how little it brings to the table, the blue, just the blue, so much blue everywhere. It's not even funny. I can't even tell if this is better or worse than the green, which this game also has. That's an important thing to note. But I'm not talking about any of that stuff today. Do you know how many alternate options there are for story and gameplay talk? Do you know how many people have yet to make their videos about the game and who are definitely planning to talk about story and gameplay above all else? No. I think I have a little more to offer to the discussion surrounding this game, at least in regards to the parts of it which have gone horrifically under-discussed in fan circles. And besides, not enough people watched the Twin Snakes video, and it's been long enough since the Pirate Yakuza soundtrack video that people hopefully forgot the time I tried this and sucked at it. So I think this video should do okay. First things first, let's talk about Yakuza 3 and musical identity. I just did a whole video talking about this in a little more depth, so here's the SparkNotes version. The earlier installments in this series are generally lumped under the label of grunge rock when people discuss how the franchise has evolved sonically. That's not entirely wrong, but there is certainly more nuance to it than that. Yakuza 1 and 2 leaned very much into this direction, and while 1 had some minor inclusions from electronic and hip-hop sources, 2 dove much deeper into those genres, while also striking out into numerous other genres for its soundtrack. This was taken in a different direction when the PS3 came along, and with it, the first spin-off, Kenzen. This game is very much the missing link when it comes to this series' musical evolution, being the point at which rock and electronic were cemented as the focal points around which future soundtracks would revolve. That said, the experimentation didn't end at genres, as this game was the debut for an assortment of diverse guitar styles and tones that would be mainstays for the series going forward. Yakuza 3 pulled from all of these games, and the result was the most consistent soundtrack the series had seen so far, both in quality and sonic identity. And then there was Kiwami 3. Funny enough, this will be my first time listening to the music, in a sense, because this is how it sounded when I played the game. Yeah, it just sounds like that. So now I get to listen to the music and pretend my copy works. And to reiterate, this isn't really Sega's fault or RGG's fault, this is just how I had to deal with playing the game. So how does the soundtrack feel? Sonically, this game is very much a current Yakuza game. That's the best way I can put it. It'll draw from basically any sound it wants, defaulting to pretty bog-standard Yakuza-sounding rock when it doesn't have a more inspired direction to take. And that's really the biggest weakness of new soundtracks in this series. They tend to fall back on iconic sounds instead of trying to form their own coherent identity. And Kiwami 3 is easily the worst example of that so far. That said, one place it does draw some inspiration from is the previous Kiwami games. From K1, it brings remixes of every major boss theme. From K2, it brings replacements for several remaining songs used in the main game, and from Ishin, it brings in some odd reused songs from previous games. So now is the part where I have to decide whether or not I care enough to speak about some of the songs that aren't part of the main story. Obviously, the boss remixes are the main attraction here, so we can't get to that quite yet. And at least concerning the main story, there aren't that many other songs to discuss. And I really don't want to talk about every song on the OST. When there's this many, it just begins to feel like a death march. So, tell you what, let's strike a little balance. Let's talk about every song you'll hear up to the end of Chapter 1. That feels like it'll be indicative of the musical identity this game's aiming for. First up is the menu theme, Ryu to Kirin no Inanaki by Yasuyuki Nagata, the Roar of the Dragon and Kirin. sounds very much like the Yakuza 7 menu theme, but I like that one a lot, so this isn't bad. Definitely better than Pirate Yakuza's menu themes, at least. In comparison to the original game's Ryujin no Inanaki, this one is very soothing and ethereal once it gets past the initial roar. Almost feels like a mixture of Yakuza 3's pre- and post-game menu themes, which is a very interesting direction to take it. I'm actually quite impressed with this and the menu theme proper, Ryu to Kiren no Myakudo, also by Yasuaki Nagata, the pulse of the dragon in Kiren. The added percussion here gives some life to the track, gets you pumped up to play the game, and keeps you thinking about what might happen to warrant such a theme in the first place. As menu themes go in this series, this is probably top 10, maybe even top 5. But, of course, the menu is hardly the game itself. Now, I assume at least some people probably wanted me to analyze the original game's menu themes, especially considering that there's 2 of them. This video is really long, and I'm so tired. So I'm gonna steal this comment instead, since I already agree with everything it says, and I'm really happy that my video reached people who would analyze the menu themes of these games. Anyway, the first track you'll hear upon entering gameplay is the battle theme for Dragon of Dojima Kiwami style, Throwdown by Keitaro Hanada. This sucks! This sucks so much. It's a quick, pulse-pounding, guitar-centric rock track, and do you know how quickly those stop being interesting when you've played every main game in this series? There has to be something else supplementing the rock elements for themes like this to sound interesting. And to be fair, this track is attempting that. The high-pitched electronic sounds as the song climaxes, the little bit where the bass gets some time to shine before the song comes back around to the chorus, there are definitely attempts here. But much like the Dragon-style theme from 7 Gaiden, these attempts at distinguishing itself from the rest of the pack just end up losing out to the very, very basic sound on display here. And that's a shame when the original game's counterpart isn't giving it much competition. Yeah, I don't like Bruise that much. At least, not while I'm playing the actual game. But that's RGG's own fault. This song suffers from the common RGG ailment of mixing their music so poorly that you can barely hear it during gameplay, especially when you're playing it off a TV on the other side of the room. When you're playing the game with headphones on, I'm sure the song comes through wonderfully, as I've recently discovered now that I actually own a decent pair of headphones. But when I'm playing the game, the song's low-key instrumentation renders it unlistenable until it hits that explosive climax, which at that point, it just sounds like the song's actually starting in the first place. That explanation is really important because when I was going into writing this segment, I was fully prepared to elaborate on not liking Bruise or Throwdown, but listening to Bruise on its own? Holy shit, I get it, dude. This is a song that demands you actually listen to it to get the most out of it. Hearing the guitars and the keyboard and the percussion all coming together, and then suddenly getting the vocals and the siren mixed in, all building up to the climax where the guitar is finally unleashed. God, this is a good song. And it tells us a lot about Yakuza 3's musical identity, too. Heavy on guitars with a softer focus on keyboard and vocals. Listening to any other track on the OST will confirm this. Now, what does Throwdown tell us about Kiwami 3? It takes nearly a minute for the song not to be generic rock music, and even then, it doesn't bring something vastly different to the table. It just leans slightly in an interesting direction. And once that noise influence leaves, it's gone until that exact part of the song comes back. So, yeah, not much of a win in my book. After that, we get the La 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 mobile theme by Etsuko Shimada. I don't know why they introduced this so quickly in either a gameplay or a soundtrack sense. Frankly, I could have gone the whole game without it. This is just a generic bubbly pop piece that sounds like it was ripped from a previous game's Hostess Maker minigame, but with some retro throwback sounds added on top, which is weird considering this should be presented as a phone of the future, considering the game takes place in the late 2000s, but I guess that's an inherent problem with the Kiwami games being so far removed from the time in which they're meant to take place. After that comes Twilight Farewell by Keitaro Hanada, a calm little guitar piece. Soothing and suitable for what it needs to be, at least I assume it is, because I actually have no clue where this is meant to play. I'm going by the order of the soundtrack itself here, and it's listed among the other themes you'll hear in Chapter 1, but scrubbing through gameplay is telling me nothing. So presumably it's a good theme, but more than likely it's one of those really obnoxious mood pieces they've been throwing on top of dialogue scenes ever since Judgment to make up for their shitty writing not eliciting any emotion at all. So in practice, I'm sure it's actually quite grating. After that, we get to see Nishida, and with him we get to hear Wild Scent by Keitaro Hanada. This is the significant generic encounter theme, akin to In Full Blast from 7 Gaiden and Defiant Strike from 8 Gaiden. This is definitely a track. It is a piece of music. As the music from this game goes, it's better than a lot of the new stuff, but that doesn't really make it stand out compared to what I've seen in previous games. I like those screeching electronic hits that pop up every so often. Anytime this series ventures close to noise is fun to witness, but then once it gets into the chorus, it just sounds like a discount slugfest from Infinite Wealth. And what a shock, that was also done by Keitaro Hanada, and it had a much more interesting palette of instruments than Wild Scent does. After that, we get Take It Easy by Keitaro Hanada. This one sounds like a funny haha sub-story theme, some harsh trumpets and a bass trying way too hard, so if it isn't already getting on your nerves now, I'm sure it would be when you hear this in the game. I say that because, again, I'm not seeing where in Chapter 1 this would even play. And barring the new Majima remix, which, for the record, this is listed as playing before his fight, that's all that Chapter 1 gives us to go off of. Well, that and 3 to 5 miscellaneous themes reused from previous games. And do you see now why I keep complimenting the Yakuza 3 soundtrack for being consistently good? Just consistent in general? When I listen to one of those songs, I know for certain it's from Yakuza 3. The Kiwami 3 soundtrack sounds like Yakuza music at best, because so much of it is just other music from Yakuza. And at worst, it sounds like boring music that could have come from anywhere. Harlem Shake jump scare. So yeah, I hope that satiates whatever desire you have for me to talk about this game's soundtrack beyond the remixes and replacements. I have no interest in hearing the new Coliseum themes, or the biker themes, or the orphanage themes, because, like I said before, I haven't had to listen to them yet. My game sounds like this, remember? So they haven't had an opportunity to take up space in my brain. I'm cherishing that while I can. And with that out of the way, we can now talk about the outright replacement tracks. Seeing that Yakuza 3 had its own distinct style that it was going for, namely good music, it only makes sense that Kiwami 3 would want to stay as far away from that as possible by making its own music instead. So, to start it off, Ryukyu style. What? No, that's the name of the theme. Ryukyu style by Yuri Fukuda. I haven't seen naming schemes this lazy since Dead Souls, and I'm pretty sure nobody even wanted to make that game. This says a lot about this one, methinks. Anyway, this song is fine. The beginning makes it sound like it's going to be a lot more boring than it actually is, but once we get about 30 seconds in, it gets good. Very bouncy beat, guitar flows over it pretty melodically, the intermittent vocal samples lend some extra energy, and once we hit that climax portion of the song, it pays off the build-up in a satisfying way. Feels appropriately islandy. And it sucks. Why is that? Because when are you going to be playing as any one style for a minute straight in this game? At least in a street battle environment. The nature of style switching suggests that you're going to be, switching styles a lot. So it would make more sense if this theme were tied to something else, like maybe, possibly, I don't know, the city in which you're fighting? Like Yakuza 3 did? The game you're remaking? Maybe you should have taken a note from that game and done that instead of doing the thing that makes style-based gameplay for every game outside of Ishin kind of unbearable. Just a thought. Also, compared to Ryukyu humming, it's just no contest. I haven't got much more to say here than I did in my previous video. It's just such a happy song. I love the guitar. I love the vocal samples. I love the organ. God damn it, I love Yakuza 3. Here's a song that shows up in Chapter 1 when originally you would have had to wait until after Kashiwagi dies forever and doesn't come back. The theme of the Avengers, The Avenger, by Shusuke Minami. Again, they had to hate this whole thing while they were making it. That or they were way more rushed than usual. I'd believe either. Comparing this to another demi-world would probably be some kind of hate crime, so I'll keep this brief by saying that the Avenger is nothing. There's maybe 5 notes in the song total, and you're intimately familiar with all of them by the 10-second point. It genuinely would have been better off ditching guitars entirely and trying to emulate hard bass or some other European genre that would kill a child from the Middle Ages if you had your bass cranked too high. Again, to compare this to another demi-world wouldn't even be fair. So I'll just say that in every way the Avenger sucks, another demi-world succeeds. On a lighter note, Ryukyu Discipline by Tomoyuki Tanaka is a good trainer theme. It's so good, in fact, that Mia doesn't deserve it because he sucks so much. The guitar is actually doing something interesting here, and the vocals and other string plucks sound very well integrated with the overall sound of the track. This feels like a cohesive piece of music that's based on Okinawa and Ryukyu. It could have been on theme if Kiwami 3 had a theme in the first place. In fact, forget Mia, this song is just too good for K3 in the first place. I enjoy Encounter the Dragoon as much as the next guy, and not only do I think this is better, I think it's a decent follow-up to it as the training theme for a Ryukyu-based trainer character. Yonashiro could have had this in a hypothetically better game, and I'd be happy with it. Unfortunately, we're back to a negative now, with Fatal Damage by Ryo Fukuda. This one sounds like a Yakuza 6 throwaway, what with all the strings on it and really echoey mixing trying to go for that massive, epic mood. The song itself is fine, if a bit too repetitive for my taste, but quite frankly, this is a perfect example of a song trying too hard. I have similar feelings about a lot of the recent boss themes in this series. There's got to be room for the soundtrack to expand and grow in mood and atmosphere as the game progresses. You can't make every fight sound like it has world-ending stakes, or else the fights that are meant to feel that way are comparatively tame. When every fight is epic and incredible, none of them are. Another problem, Fatal Damage's main melody is comprised of very long notes, and while it is surrounded by those quicker violins, the echoey mixing of everything makes the song sound more lethargic than it actually is. For a turn-based game, this wouldn't be that much of an issue, but combined with the fact that you're fighting every boss in K3 the exact same way, you've got a recipe for a repetitive boss theme reinforcing a repetitive gameplay loop. In the original, More Huge works to emphasize the exact opposite factors for Yakuza 3's boss fights. The quicker tempo and heavier use of staccato notes keeps the pace of combat up tremendously, especially when the combat in Yakuza 3 is often about waiting to see what the enemy does and reacting to that. And that's another thing, every boss fight in the original game fights in a very unique way. None of them play the same, and none of them can be approached the same. Even between phases, they're vastly different. More Huge is a theme that reminds you to think on your feet and stay in the moment. Don't lose yourself in repeating a formula that worked somewhere else, because it's not going to work here. Also, the song is just way better on its own merits, so that helps. I still can't believe Yakuza Kiwami 2 had a long battle theme called Extremely Huge in it, and not only does it sound nothing like More Huge, it fucking sucks! Talking of long battle themes that fucking suck, 7 Gaiden has one of those, and so does Kiwami 3. Onslaught by Tomoyuki Tanaka. This song is a prime example of what I think must have been a crippling lack of creativity in the sound studio for this game. Now, given the game's extreme focus on guitars above pretty much anything else, you'd hope that they would be able to present it in a diverse set of tracks that all use it to sound meaningfully different. They do not. And not only that, we've gotten this far into the track list, and on only a couple tracks have I mentioned them sounding any different to the normal fare. For the most part, every track here is either generic rock fare, generic some other genre fare, or something so generic that it was yanked from a different game and shoved in here because they knew this game didn't have enough of a musical identity for people to notice they were pulling that shit. Man, I'm so mad. I'm gonna talk about ill treatment so I won't be so mad. In classic Yakuza 3 fashion, this is one of the best long battle themes in the series. There's so much going on this track all the time, nothing ever has a chance to get boring. A wonderfully calm keyboard build-up into the hype-as-fuck main melody, a quick shift into more of a hip-hop sound with a little sampled verse, a breakdown segment with the returning keyboard alongside a calmer guitar that shows up during the sampled verse, both rocking in tandem with the synth lead going a little nuts, then a clean transition into the second half of the song with the guitar now taking the lead, all building into one final explosive climax that ties back into the beginning of the song. This feels not only like a cohesive piece of music, but like something that you wouldn't instantly get tired of hearing during a long battle. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, should be the entire point of a long battle theme? Again, stuff like this is why I praise Yakuza 3's soundtrack as much as I do. It follows all the right steps for every individual song to be the best it can possibly be, and it does all that while making those songs form together into one satisfying package. I don't know how many more ways I could say the same thing, but I keep needing to because I don't want to make this entire video me dogging on K3's piss poor attempt at sending up one of the greatest soundtracks in series history. There's a few more major examples of replacement I can mention. The Coliseum themes, the final boss of the Avengers, the Amon theme, although the latter two are just reused from previous games, so I don't even have anything interesting to say about those. Oh, I guess I can technically mention the running theme. You only do a chase sequence a few times in this game, but accompanying the one at the beginning of Chapter 6 is this new theme, Close Quarters by Homare Kawazu. I'm honestly a little baffled by this, mostly because the song is good. Like, quite good. It breaks away from what at this point has become a very generic focus on rock instrumentation for a new focus on a quick, intense electronic beat, with some tastefully distorted guitars building up over it to lend to the tension of the moment. And once the song gets started proper, it actually goes quite hard. At one point, it sort of turns into a Power Unleashed ripoff, and if I wanted to be extra mean, I could call it a ripoff of Wounded Hound and Yakuza 0, but it never goes to quite that length to warrant calling it that. The one thing this song very much isn't is Dead Run, the chase theme from Yakuza 3. It's sort of a slept-on track, mostly because people suck at the chase minigame and don't want to be reminded it exists. Pro tip, you don't have to sprint all the time. Enemies will slow down when you're not holding R2, so don't feel like you have to dash through crowds or around narrow corners, because you can't do that. You also have a lot more leeway to fall behind your target, and it's never too difficult to catch back up with them, so you really shouldn't be taking these parts so seriously. But aside from that, Dead Run works very well as a chase theme. Later ones in the series would move in a more lighthearted, jazzy direction, but this one keeps the mood quite serious, and it makes these moments feel like they actually matter. Especially for the one that breaks up both halves of the Snakeflower long battle, it makes sense that this theme wouldn't spice things up too much, making it the best interlude track it can possibly be, instead of having it fail at being a different kind of song. Anyway, we've now reached the most important replacement track that I have to bring up. Yakuza Kiwami 3 has a brand new licensed theme, Ikizama by Ryosuke Hori, Saori Yoshida, and Naoki. This not only replaces Loser by Eikichi Yazawa, it also replaces, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Clay Doll on the Cradle as the final long battle theme. Ikizama is fine. It's fine. I'm sure if I liked the game at all, I'd feel more positive about it, as I generally am with any anime OP or ED. But this fails twofold. Not only does it fail to capture the energy of Loser, which completely reshaped my view of the original game when I learned of its existence, pair this song with Yakuza 3 and the game turns into a spy story. And that suits it, don't you think? An international mystery involving the Japanese government, the CIA, and an arms smuggling ring, sightseeing opportunities around the country, secret modes of transportation, shockingly violent assassinations, debriefings about the next high-profile target to eliminate. Yakuza 3 is very much a spy story when you look at it from the right angle, and Loser complements that perfectly. So not only does it fail in that regard, Ikizama also manages to fail as a substitute for the final long battle theme. They ditched the vocal track, leaving only the instrumental, and do you know what this game was not in need of? Another high-energy, bland-as-hell, guitar-centric rock track. And that's all this is, another song on the soundtrack. And that's a crying shame when they managed to not only waste Naoki's time making this garbage, they managed to make a song so lame that it couldn't do anything right for what it needed to be. But I guess that makes it the theme song Yakuza Kiwami 3 truly deserves. You already know Clay Doll on the Cradle is fantastic. It's so good that they basically copy-pasted it but slightly worse for the final long battle of Yakuza 0. Not to mention the entire premise. I mean, come on, Kiryu's gotta rush into a massive multi-floored structure being held hostage by a Yakuza family within to rescue a comatose person from a tragic example of a man who lost his way after losing his father, and also represents what Kiryu could become if he didn't have the good people surrounding him that he does. Looks, acts, and stinks like a fish. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, Clay Doll was great. The guitar gets ditched for almost the entire song, and when the climax is finally built up to a minute in, we get teased with it, only for the rug to be pulled from beneath us and the melody gets handed off to the keyboard for the big climax. And these solitary notes, the keyboard is barely being touched to bring this song to life. Just like Daigo, it's barely clinging on, pushing Kiryu to rush to the top and make sure Mine doesn't make the biggest mistake of his life. Kiwami 3 could never in a million years pull off what this song does. And that's all for the replacement tracks. All that's left now is the remixes, and Yakuza has a pretty strong history with those. Several games contain at least one remix of some kind, and they're usually better for it. Even considering that I don't like a lot of the K1 soundtrack, there's stuff on there like Funk Goes On Kiwami and Receive You the Mad Type that I think work really well and function as their own independent pieces of music. So I'm not coming at this from a hating perspective when I say that there are 7 more tracks to discuss. 5 of the most lame, bullshit, cop-out, piss-poor excuses for remakes I've ever heard in my life, one that had potential to be something more, and one that actually attained that potential for a fleeting moment. Which is which? Wait and see, dear viewer. Moving in order of appearance, we've got Majima's theme, Receive and Stab You. The original is personally in my top 3, potentially top 2 Majima themes. Partly because his fights in 3 are so good, but in no small part because the actual song is just great. It's such a perfect opening note for Yakuza 3 to begin on, at least as far as non-street battle themes go. Shows off the increased experimentation with pretty much everything. Weird and goofy vocal samples, new and varied guitar tones, a far more distinct hip-hop direction that goes beyond drum sequencing and sampling, and topping it all off with fantastic renditions of 2 Receive You riffs. I have a very hard time finding anything wrong with this part of the song. And to those who would find the vocal samples stupid, yes, they're stupid, and they're silly. It's Majima. This song is a sign not only of how cemented his identity was in the series by this point, but for his Chapter 7 boss fight, it's a clear sign that he hasn't lost his touch. He's still the same man we know and love, and he's going to stay that way until Yakuza 5, but let's not talk about that right now. The Kiwami mix works to undo as much of that as feasibly possible. Removes basically all of the hip-hop and hard focuses on the rock, which wouldn't be so bad hypothetically, but that's a big part of why I started the video talking about the rest of the soundtrack. It's all rock, and it's all really boring. This song choosing to move in this direction feels less like an inspired choice and more like a decision made to simplify the process of remixing the music. But it didn't have to be this way. At the beginning and end of the song, we can hear some breakcore inspired drums and a very powerful bass lick, which leads into a drum loop with so much energy inside it that it tricked me into thinking the song had changed into something else for the second go around. But no, that was the ending. Just, oh my god, dude. Imagine if the entire song was like that. Ditch the guitar emphasis, lean all the way into those drums and that hard-ass beat. Do something inspired and innovative with the soundtrack. Would it really be so difficult to come up with something new? Maybe it would be, I wouldn't know. But from where I'm sitting, it sure seems like they had a good idea and snuffed it out because it would have taken too much time or money to see it through to the end. Anyway, moving on, we've got Pure Malice, the Tamashiro family theme. I used to sleep on this, but ever since K3 dropped, I've become much more of a fan of this track. There's a few iconic parts of this song that I think would need to be in a remix of it, though after what happened to Stab You, my faith was admittedly a little shaken. The first thing that matters is the siren. Yakuza has used siren samples ever since its inception. It's one of the most crucial instruments for a good Yakuza soundtrack. And seeing that the Tamashiro family is a remnant of the Tojo's violent and bloodthirsty past, calling back to its roots like that is a great way of stabilizing them in series canon as more than cannon fodder. The second thing it would need to keep up is the black man nutting vocal sample. I'm not sure how else to phrase that, but it lends a lot to the mood of the track, especially when you don't call it that. The third thing is the melody of the song, which feels weird to specify because obviously the track would keep the melody, right? A remix is about changing all of the pieces that surround the core of the song. It wouldn't make sense to tear it into a completely different direction halfway in and also have neither of the other two things I mentioned, would it? So yeah, the Kiwami mix retains none of these elements. And what does it sound like? Say it with me now. Every other song on the fucking soundtrack! Pure Malice was a standout in the original game because of how heavily it leaned into the guitars while still retaining other elements of the soundtrack. And it was an example of some of the nastiest sounds we'd ever heard come from a guitar in this series. Not only does the Kiwami mix remove the things that used to tie it back with the rest of the soundtrack, and in doing so make it feel more generic, it somehow managed to make the guitars sound more boring too. And it makes the song feel a lot less special because of it. That and everything else it lacks. Up next is Independence for Violence, the first remix we would see of the Nishiki family's theme. I've always felt that this was one of the strongest remixes in series history, not just for the excellent source material, but also for how it fundamentally transforms it by adding more onto the song in logical ways. Keep the saxophone lick in the beginning, but give the first solo section to the guitar, and then follow it up with some fantastic organ riffing, then bring it back home with some amazing brass work. Trumpets rarely get a chance to shine on these soundtracks, which, again, makes this song all the more special. The insanely powerful guitar underneath it all drives the song forward with relentless attitude, much like how the family itself just refuses to die, despite fate itself conspiring to steal away the patriarchs the moment they give it the opportunity. Even when he's not here to lead it himself, Nishiki's will and endless ambition remains with the family to the bitter end. But just because this end is indeed bitter, doesn't mean it has to go out sounding pathetic. So how does the Kiwami mix do? very strangely. It doesn't remove anything like the previous remixes, but the things it adds are so inconsequential that they barely even make a dent in the sonic identity this track already possesses. In fact, this remix doesn't sound much like an original song at all, which makes it very difficult to think about it independent from the original. I guess I can talk about the mixing, since that'll become a much bigger problem soon. This song sounds like it was recorded in a giant empty room. If the instruments were all PNGs in a music video, they would all be slightly lower quality here compared to the original. Also, the organ would be replaced with a little Schroeder toy piano. It's really weird, I'm not sure how better to describe it, but the song just sounds worse. And that's kind of embarrassing when the original I'm comparing it to came out nearly 2 decades ago. You'd think instrument synthesizing and recording technology would have improved from then, not made to sound worse. And when the most interesting stuff I have to say about a song is its mixing, that's how you know it failed as a remix. It brings nothing new to the table that isn't confusing technical stuff that even I, someone who is not well versed in audio engineering, can tell is fucked up in some way. I can't believe it's even possible to make a song this unimpactful, especially when it's made out of such an impactful song. If you are looking for impact, though, you need to look no further than FM Soundstorm, Richardson's theme. First major boss theme that's moving entirely adverse to the guitars for a significant part, and it's all the better for it. This guy is meant to feel off-putting, like he's from a whole other world, and a song like this is exactly what he needs to fit that mood. The heavy synth usage and simple melody might have floundered on a lesser soundtrack, but since Yakuza 3 is always so intent on experimenting with the tone of its instruments, it manages to make this work shockingly well. And once the guitars come in for the second half, it's all over. This is the kind of song I don't mind hearing more than once. It's special enough to hit like a freight train the first time, but it's catchy and groovy enough for me to welcome it back not just for an encore, but an extended encore that covers 2 boss fights, a midsection, and an epilogue that covers the rest of the final long battle. This is more of a theme for Black Monday itself than it is for just Richardson, and it fits that role so well. This is the part where I would talk about the Kiwami mix, but unfortunately I've gone deaf. It feels like every track is maxed out here. When we've got multiple melodies going, I genuinely cannot tell which one is meant to be the lead. Even without that, though, we've once again abandoned the melody for the first verse of the track after the introductory bit, and we've also brought the guitar focus in far too soon. There used to be some AI allegations surrounding the soundtrack when it first dropped, which I'm pretty sure were proven wrong basically immediately. That regardless of whether it did or didn't use such tools, though, I can see where some of those accusations are coming from. A common element of AI music is diverging from an established melody you feed it off of to go in its own random solo of whatever it wants. This song very much feels like they fed an algorithm the revamped first 30 or so seconds and then just rolled with whatever it spat out. Not to mention, it would explain the weird low quality of some of the instrumentation. And don't get it twisted, this isn't me trying to revive those rumors again. I'm not saying that I think it used those tools, and I disavow anyone who tries to run with this as foolproof evidence of Gen AI usage on the soundtrack. It just happens that it makes for an interesting way of justifying why the music came out this way. And even besides that, once again, this remix barely brings enough to the table to warrant discussing any other part of it. So now we have an interesting case. Lau Ka-long's theme, Ogre, has returned. Cards on the table, Lau is one of my favorite recurring characters in the series, or at least he was before 7 revived him for literally no reason. I greatly appreciate his role in 3's story as being a part of Kiryu's past coming back to haunt him, and that only multiplies when Kazuma's ghost shows up to save him from the snake flower just like Kazuma did all those years ago. Only this time, instead of saying Lau died off screen, we get some real irrefutable proof of his fucking whatever, you get what I'm saying. And on top of all of that, this song is a huge part of why I like him so much. Some very tasteful Chinese flair that doesn't overtake the song and turn it into some stereotypical nonsense, and beyond the intro, we get yet another synth-focused track. Especially following ill treatment for the Kamurocho long battle, this song is a major breath of fresh air. Add on to that the little guitar strums in the first half, the smooth transition into the climax with these epic cinematic violins, and some of the funkiest synth melodies the series had seen up to this point. This song is as much of a triumphant climax as Lau's fight itself is. And I'm gonna die on that hill no matter what the fandom thinks. This song, this battle, this whole chapter is the dying gasp of the Snake Flower Triad. And I wouldn't have them go in any other way than what we got right here. They were easily some of the most difficult parts of Yakuza 1 and Kiwami alike, and it's fitting to me that their big send-off in 3 would live up to that standard. So, how about that remix, huh? Well, maybe RGG decided to get their asses in gear specifically for people like me, because this is that remix which actually manages to cling on to some of that vast potential for longer than 10 seconds. For one glorious minute, this remix is more than distinct from the original song. It's distinct from the rest of the Kiwami 3 soundtrack. For one perfect, beautiful minute, we get some harsh electronics over a fantastic bass line, guitar riffs shifted up a few notes to give an entirely different feel to the track, and a deceptively similar introduction that actually pays off with some real, honest-to-God subversion. Of course, after that minute, it just goes right back into the same standard guitar you'd expect from a Kiwami mix. But for that glorious minute, Lau Ka-long got a new theme, worthy of being tied to a boss fight with him in it. It reminds me a lot of Wildfire from Pirate Yakuza, and how that song spent about 30 seconds being really distinct and interesting and abiding by the game's sonic identity before giving up and shifting to some weird ethereal trance style and then doubly giving up and just doing the original song again. Or, more appropriately, how the Stab You remix got that little moment of something at the end of the track. Fitting that both it and the Ogre remix were done by the same guy. Now let's hope Yasuyuki Nagata gets to actually capitalize on what's clearly a very inspired vision for remixes here sometime in the future, because we are so much worse off without vision like this in these games. 2 left now, and we've just hit what might be the best song from Yakuza 3. And not on a personal level, there's others I prefer, but on a community-wide objective level, this is definitely the agreed upon peak. Namida Naki Jojo, lyricism without tears. Love without regret or second thought. The ultimate expression of Kiryu's love for Shintaro Kazuma, his real father, with whom he shared a bond that went deeper than blood, further than image, and stronger than the willpower of any man who would dare challenge it. For everything that Shintaro was, not only is Joji not that, Kiryu's come to accept that as the truth. And from the scant characterization we get of Joji, we see a man who must have loved his brother, and by extension loves his surrogate nephew enough to entrust him with the future of something he holds as dear as Kiryu holds the Yakuza itself. Kiryu asks why Joji is just going to abide by the rules of the fight after beating him, let Toma live, and defy the CIA. And Joji says as much himself, love without a second thought. This song carries that meaning, and plenty more. And when it comes to a feeling of triumph over adversity, you're hard-pressed to find a song that hits those notes harder than this one does. The powerful electric guitar that expresses its soul profoundly and passionately, only to be met with an acoustic guitar that doesn't challenge it so much as elevate it, even sings in tandem with it for certain passages. For some parts of the song, though, is another guitar keeping rhythm underneath the electric and acoustic parts, perhaps representing a spirit alongside Kiryu and Joji that unites them with another unbreakable bond. And the violins sound nice too. I didn't think I had that much lofty shit to say about this song, but maybe they're right. Maybe I'm a Fujoji after all. I'm only going to say this once, so cherish it while it lasts. Lyricism without tacos. This remix is really weird, not just because of the flamenco elements it brings to the table, but also because this song is unremixable in a way. Any change to its instrumental DNA would fundamentally change its identity and meaning for the story, which would make it nearly symbolic of something that once held that meaning, which this song very much is. I mean, what else is there to glean from it? Kiwami 3 has no sonic identity, so I can't really say it sounds like a K3 song, and it sounds so not remotely like the original that the only connection is in the name and fight scenario. Well, that and the parts that are barely changed from the original at all. So that's just kind of it for this one. Fiercely uninteresting outside of the parts where it just becomes a song that isn't even lyricism without tears in the first place. All of that said about this being the peak of Y3 music, though, there's one more song from this soundtrack that holds just as special a place in fans' hearts, if not more so. The first final boss theme in the series to ditch the melodrama and just rock the fuck out, not to mention the final boss theme attached to the best final boss, Yoshitaka Mine, Fly. I'm not sure what to say about this song that hasn't already been said in a much better way by someone else. This is yet another perfect song. Powerful driving guitars with a hint of Joji or maybe even Shintaro's acoustic underneath it. Some processed drums that carry enough of the hip-hop spirit to keep it present here, the newly emphasized violins that have become more and more relevant as the game progresses, the super compressed and barely understandable vocal hits screaming the song's title. It even has unorthodox percussion. When I think of this series at its absolute best, this is what comes to mind. Kiryu shirtless on a rooftop, battling a man who, like Nishiki, lost his way for a lack of family and brothership, and like Ryuji, has come to only see his own worth in some barely quantifiable sense of value that holds no meaning as soon as you realize that isn't what defines you. But most frightening of all, he's a man like Kiryu, who sees the world in black and white, values those he loves deeply, came from an environment that permanently scarred him and shaped his worldview, and isn't afraid to do whatever it takes to see that his version of the right thing is seen through to the end. And it's because of all of these things that Kiryu defeating Mine holds as much worth as it does. It also helped that he died when he did, presumably having internalized all those lessons he learned, instead of popping back up spouting some inane bullshit about Kiryu not being able to love his kids because he likes fighting too much. And speaking of that, we have reached the Kiwami mix of Fly. Man, this shit sounds like Fly inspiring epic emotional mix try not to feel challenge. Sucks. It's just the same song but louder and worse mixed and maybe a couple new instruments per sometimes. Like Lyricism Without Tears, this is a difficult song to ruin, and that's definitely not what happened here. But at the same time, it's a song that feels impossible to remix if you're not going to go the extra mile to actually remix it, which Ishin did, somehow. A remake of a game that's not even Yakuza 3. Turn it into something new that follows the same steps, but turns it into an entirely different end result, like tracing a line in the sand with a stick instead of on sheet paper with a pencil. This is just replacing the pencil with 3 pens glued together and pretending like drawing 3 lines is somehow more impressive, despite all the lines being shaky and not as impressive as the single line. And that comparison's probably a massive stretch and not good at all, but so is this remix. And if not mentioning the weird violin passage and the bit with some extra electronics that mean nothing in the grand scheme of things means I get to stop thinking about Kiwami 3 for the entire rest of my life just a smidgen of a second sooner, then I'm gonna do that. And you've most likely noticed that I have less and less to say about Kiwami 3's soundtrack as I go on. To tie this all back to the beginning, that's because speaking about one song from this game is pretty much speaking about all of them. They have guitars and drums, sometimes they include other things, and it feels like the music is being made because this is a new game and they couldn't just reuse assets the way they reuse movesets and environments and heat actions and models and voice acting. The one thing you can't reuse in a remake like this is music. Especially considering that there's such little stuff in the game that actually feels original and defines Kiwami 3 as a product separate from the half-dozen other Yakuza games it shamelessly rips from. But when it came time to actually make that music, it wasn't being composed and performed with the intent to tell a story. It was done with the intent to put pegs in holes. We need a long battle theme, we need a generic boss theme, we need a theme for the bounty side quest, and then when it came time for the boss tracks, it wasn't, we need to reimagine this song to make it fit with the new soundtrack we've created. It was, we need to make this sound just different enough to where it isn't blatantly the same thing. That's how this soundtrack feels. That's how the new English translation feels. That's how the story editions before the ending feel. That's how the entire game feels. We need to make this product just distinct enough to make people think they're buying a new game that still feels like Yakuza 3. And if that was their goal, they failed miserably on both fronts. This doesn't feel like an original game, and worse still, this doesn't feel like Yakuza 3. So what have we learned here today, folks? Music is good, Yakuza 3 is good, play Yakuza 3, burn your local copy of Kiwami 3. Excellent, hope to see everyone in class same time next week. That's not a promise for a video, to clarify, that's just me being stupid. One thing I can promise, though, is that Dark Ties will come in the future. I'm sure someone's already left a comment about that. Oh, where's Konda's new boss theme? Where's Sandcastle? Where's Alone in the Dark? What is that what it's called? Fucking, who gives a shit, dude? It'll be in the future when I talk about Dark Ties as a whole, which will happen, eventually. In terms of music discussion in general, I'd be happy to do another video like this sometime in the far-off future, but for now, I've got my own plans in mind. We'll see how that goes, assuming it does go. For now, special thanks as always to the patrons, Jestbeat, Hashbear, Indolent Lard, Cohen, and Loki. Join them if you feel like you're a bad enough dude to give me money. And to everyone watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a good day. Take care of yourself.